Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, we just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you all for watching. We truly appreciate your support. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It's totally free, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. Now, with all that said, let's jump straight into the story.
The house sat silent, its old boards creaking with the weight of years. Trees surrounded it, their branches reaching out like the claws of a forgotten beast, and a lake ran across the land, its surface often shrouded in a mist that seemed to linger forever. It was a place steeped in history, but not the kind that made you feel safe and welcomed. This house had a darker past, a legacy that made the bravest of souls shiver. I arrived at the old house on a crisp autumn evening, the sun having set some hours ago, leaving behind a pale twilight. The air was thick with the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth, and the only sound was the rustling of the wind through the trees. My name is Helen, and I've always loved living life to the fullest, seeking out the unknown and embracing the thrill of the unexpected. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to experience. The story of the house was well known, at least among the locals. It was said to have been haunted for as long as anyone could remember. The last owner, an old woman named Clara, had died under mysterious circumstances, and her granddaughter, desperate to be rid of the place, she had put it up for sale, but nobody would buy it. So she listed it on Airbnb so people could rent it as the area was popular with tourists. The listing promised a unique experience, a chance to stay in a house that was unlike any other. The price was tempting, and the allure of the unknown was too strong for me to resist. As I approached the front door, a chill ran down my spine. The house was clearly in disrepair, with peeling paint and cracked windows. The porch creaked under my feet, and the door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, the musty smell of old books and forgotten rooms overwhelming. The granddaughter, a young woman with hollow eyes and a weary smile, greeted me at the door. Her name was Emma, and she seemed eager to get this rental over with. She led me through the house, showing me the various rooms. The walls were lined with faded portraits of the family that had once lived there, and the furniture was old and worn. Despite the decrepit state, there was a certain charm to the place, a kind of eerie beauty that I couldn't quite shake. "Be careful not to venture into the basement," Emma warned as we ascended the main staircase. "It's a bit unstable, and we've had some trouble with it in the past." I nodded, though I was curious. What kind of trouble could a basement cause? I made a mental note to explore it later, when I had more time to indulge in the mystery. My room was on the second floor, near the back of the house. It was spacious, with high ceilings and a large window overlooking the lake. The bed was an antique four-poster, its canopy hanging low and creating a sense of seclusion. As I unpacked my bags, I noticed a small door in the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a heavy curtain. It was the only door in the house I hadn't seen. "Emma, what's this?" I called out, tugging the curtain aside to reveal the door. "Oh, that's just the storage room," she replied, her voice tense. "It's not really meant for guests, but feel free to use it if you need extra space." I thanked her and decided to leave the door for later, focusing instead on settling in. As night fell, the house grew eerily quiet. The only sounds were the distant lapping of the lake against the shore and the occasional creak of the old wood. I felt a sense of unease, but I attributed it to the late hour and the unfamiliar surroundings. I tried to distract myself by reading a book, but my eyes kept drifting to the small door. It seemed to beckon, a silent invitation to explore the unknown. I couldn't resist. Setting my book aside, I stood and approached the door. It was old and worn, with a tarnished brass handle that felt cold to the touch. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, with a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from the gap in the door behind me. It was small, with a low ceiling that made me feel claustrophobic. The air was even colder here, and a musty smell filled my nostrils. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old boxes and dusty trinkets. But what caught my attention was a small, ornate mirror on the far wall. It was surrounded by a frame of twisted wood and had a faint, almost imperceptible glow. I moved closer, my curiosity getting the better of me. As I stood before the mirror, I noticed something odd. My reflection seemed to be moving, independent of my own actions. I reached out to touch the surface, and my hand passed through as if the mirror were a portal. A voice, low and whispery, echoed from the room. "Welcome, Helen." I spun around, my heart racing. The room was empty, but the voice seemed to come from the shadows. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the faintest rustle of movement. I took a step back, my pulse quickening. Then, without warning, the room plunged into darkness. Panic set in, and I fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows around me seemed to thicken, and I felt something cold and clammy brush against my skin. I screamed, but my voice was muffled, as if the air itself was trying to silence me. The darkness was suffocating, and I could feel the presence of something malevolent. It was as if the room itself was alive, and it didn't want me to leave. Suddenly, the mirror lit up, casting a dim, eerie light across the room. I could see the outlines of figures, shadowy and menacing, emerging from the darkness. They moved with a fluid, inhuman grace, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I backed away, my hands shaking, but there was nowhere to go. One of the figures stepped forward, and I could see its face. It was twisted, its features distorted in a grotesque parody of a human. "You were meant to come here," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You were meant to join us." I tried to reason with it, to plead for my life, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The figures moved closer, and I felt a cold hand grab my wrist. I struggled, but it was no use. I was being dragged deeper into the room, the shadows enveloping me. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was the mirror, its surface shimmering with a strange, hypnotic light. And then, nothing. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the room, my head throbbing with pain. The door was open, and the light from the hallway spilled in, casting long, strange shadows. I didn't remember how I had escaped, but I was determined to find out. I stumbled out of the room and down the stairs, my mind racing with questions. Emma was still in the house, sitting in the living room with a cup of tea. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "Helen, are you all right?" she asked, standing up. "I heard you scream." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know what happened. I was in the storage room, and then, the shadows, they were alive. They dragged me into the darkness, and Emma's face paled, and she looked away. "That room, it has a history," she said softly. "My grandmother never spoke of it, but I heard rumors. People who entered that room never came out the same. Some say they were dragged away by shadowy figures, never to be seen again." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are the figures? Who are they?" Emma sighed, her eyes distant. "They say the house was built over an ancient burial ground. The spirits of the dead are trapped here, unable to move on. They prey on the living, drawing them into the darkness and consuming their souls." I felt a wave of nausea. "Why didn't you warn me? Why did you let me stay here?" Emma looked at me with a sad, resigned expression. "I needed the money, Helen. And I thought you might be different. You seemed brave. Strong. I thought you might be able to break the curse." I felt a mix of anger and fear. Break the curse? How? "There's a legend," Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "A legend of a mirror that holds the key to the spirit's imprisonment. If you can find it, and if you can destroy it, the spirits will be set free, and the house will be at peace." I felt a surge of determination. If this was true, then I had to try. I couldn't just leave the house in this state, especially after what I had experienced. "Where is the mirror?" I asked, my voice firm. Emma hesitated, then led me to the basement. The stairs were steep and narrow, and the air grew colder with each step. When we reached the bottom, I could see a small, dimly lit room at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly ajar, and a faint, otherworldly glow seeped from the cracks. Be careful, Emma warned. This is where the mirror is. But it's dangerous. The spirits are strongest here. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, the room was filled with an oppressive darkness, the air thick with the scent of decay. In the center of the room stood the mirror, its frame even more twisted and sinister in the dim light. The figures from the storage room were there, waiting for me, their eyes gleaming with a hungry intensity. I felt a wave of fear, but I couldn't turn back now. I approached the mirror, my hand trembling as I reached for the edge. The figures hissed, their forms shifting and contorting, but I ignored them. I had to focus. With a sudden burst of strength, I grabbed the mirror and pulled it off the wall. It was heavier than I expected, and I staggered under its weight. The figures lunged forward, their claw-like hands reaching for me, but I managed to drag the mirror to the center of the room and raise it high above my head. I will break this curse. I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. The figures paused, their eyes narrowing. Then, with a collective roar, they charged. I braced myself, lifting the mirror and smashing it against the ground with all my strength. The glass shattered, and a blinding light filled the room. The figures screamed, their forms dissolving into the air as the light engulfed them. When the light faded, the room was empty. The mirror was nothing but a pile of broken glass, and the air was no longer heavy with the presence of the spirits. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of relief washing over me. I turned to Emma, who was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's over, I said, my voice shaking. The curse is broken. We both knew that the house would never be the same, that the darkness had been lifted. But the memory of what had happened would stay with us forever, a reminder of the power of the unknown and the courage it sometimes takes to face it. As I left the house the next morning, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the land. The trees no longer seemed menacing, and the lake shimmered in the light. The house stood silent, its old boards creaking with the wind, but it was at peace. I wondered if anyone would ever stay in that house again, if they would be brave enough to face the legacy of the past. But for me, it was enough to know that I had lived, and that sometimes, the greatest adventures are the ones that push you to the edge of your sanity. And as I drove away, I couldn't help but think that the room under the stairs had been waiting for me, that it had chosen me for a reason. I had faced my fears, and in doing so, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. Let us know in the comments section, would you have done the same as Helen? Or would you have left at the first chance you got? Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.